Hey everyone, welcome to another video by Simplilearn. In this video, we will discuss about JavaScript and TypeScript interview questions. If you are planning to attend an interview, then these questions will help you crack any interview at ease. But before we begin, make sure you have subscribed to our YouTube channel and clicked on the bell icon so you never miss an update from Simplilearn. So without any further ado, let's get started.
So let's get started with the beginner JavaScript questions. We have multiple levels available. Here we start with the beginner level first. So the first question is always like, what do you understand about a JavaScript? So we know it very well. The JavaScript is a very popular scripting language. It is basically designed for client-side scripting and server-side scripting development. Why server-side? Because nowadays JavaScript is also used in a backend using Node.js. So that's why it is also called for server-side development. So the question is like, JavaScript is actually also helps the developers to develop some more responsive HTML pages, okay, which can be well understood and executed by the web browser, okay, which having the support capabilities for object-oriented programming skills. Now, the next question is like, what is the difference between a JavaScript and Java? See, the reason is because the JavaScript initials are Java. So everybody think like, okay, there is some relationship with the Java. So actually the thing is like, there is no relationship with Java. I would say JavaScript is object-based language, where the Java is object-oriented language. A lot of syntax and some standards are matching with Java. That's why exactly it is saying it is JavaScript. Otherwise, there is nothing like that. But another difference, if I talk about, JavaScript is mainly designed to run in the browsers, where the Java is designed especially for the virtual machine and operating system. Now the other thing is like, JavaScript does not need a compilation because it is directly used interpreter. But when you talk about Java, it requires a compiler as well as the interpreter both. Now, what type of various data types are supported? So all standard data types like in byte, short, int, long, float, double, character, boolean, these all different type of data types are supported in JavaScript also, just like in traditional programming languages. Okay. Now, what are the features of JavaScript? So the first feature which you always remember, it is a lightweight programming language. It is being interpreted by the browsers rather than compiled. It is a cross-platform. That means it can work across multiple browsers. So it is not specific to the browsers. So that we need to understand. Next, it is an open source. Hence, you do not need to pay for any licensing fees. It comes free with all different type of browsers. It is an object-oriented, but I would not say it is a pure object-oriented. I would rather say it is an object-based language. Next, it can gel well with multiple front-end as well as the back-end technologies, because most of the languages which are coming up in a market, they have a support available to get integrated with the JavaScript, and due to that, JavaScript is very popular. So it is also used especially for the development like a network-based application. So in case if you want to have some kind of network-centric application, here the JavaScript really suits very well. Okay. Next question, what are the advantages of JavaScript? So the first advantage which we are talking about, like JavaScript basically have a very nice interactive language. It is a event-based, okay, functional programming language, I would say. So it is a quick feedback because it loads very fast in your existing web pages. It is giving you the support of developing a very rich user interface. Because of that, your application look consistent across multiple type of browsers. Another is like, we have a variety of JavaScript based frameworks are available. Like you can talk about Angular, you talk about React, you talk about Vue. They're all basically different type of JavaScript based frameworks that helps the developer to enhance their skills with writing less amount of codes. So how you create a script? or how you create an object in JavaScript, it is very simple, the curly braces. Curly braces is basically designed to give you the feel of this is a typical object. There are a variety of ways are there to create an object in JavaScript, which we're gonna see in our next PPT. Okay, now here we see about the next set of questions which are there with us, like how to create an array in JavaScript. So creating an array in JavaScript is very easy. Now you can see the square brackets. Okay, they are the way to basically create an array in a JavaScript. So just a square brackets are a very simpler way, so-called literals, to create the array objects in JavaScript. Actually, you should know that array is also an object, which is a predefined object, comes with your JavaScript, so-called implicit objects. Now, what are the built-in methods available in JavaScript? So you remember about these methods comes from those built-in objects comes with your JavaScript, as we have mentioned in our last slides, like math, boolean, string, okay, date. They're all basically predefined objects are available. Under those objects, these methods are actually available. Like date, if you can see, it will display the current date and time. Concat, to concat two different type of string. Push, some adding some new records into your array. Pop, to remove. Round, to do the round. Length, to calculate the length of the string. So these are all some well-known methods or frequently used methods available in JavaScript. Now, what different type of scopes available in JavaScript for the variables now? So scopes are basically designed to give you the visibility within your program. Okay, so different type of scopes are available. One is called a global scope. So global scope is having the availability within a file. Anywhere else you can access this particular code or particular variable. That is called global scope. And local scopes are those scopes which are accessible within a function and hence cannot be accessed by any other function or outside of this function. So two standard type of scopes which are available here. Now, what is the this keyword in JavaScript? This means to refer the current object. Okay, so whenever you see the this keyword, it is designed to refer the current object in JavaScript. So we typically define the this keyword to assign the value to my current object properties. Usually this is a place where that this keyword is mostly used. Now, what are the conventions of giving the names to the variables? Okay, so some standard naming convention which we should always follow, but few things, as you remember, there are certain reserve keywords are there in JavaScript which you cannot offer while giving the names to your variables or to your functions. Like if I can say var, let, const, and many more which are there available, which you cannot assign to your any existing variable provided or functions under your JavaScript. Now, here they are trying to say variable names cannot begin with any numeric value. Like you cannot give var with ABC, so not ABC, I would say rather 1, 2, 3 or something like that. So they must be a combination of, I would say, integer as well as a character. Okay, so they must only begin with letter or underscore characters. It is the same like as we have it in Java also. Now, naming conventions are very important. JavaScript is a case sensitive, hence the small a and capital A have two different meanings for the JavaScript. So that part needs to be well taken care of. Now, what is a callback in JavaScript? So you need to understand the callback in JavaScript is a kind of function which you are passing as a parameter to the another function to execute. Okay, so callbacks are mainly designed to tell your application that they need to wait rather than continue to execute. So callbacks will help you to behave asynchronously, and that's what exactly this most valuable feature of JavaScript. So as I discussed already, so it is where the function needs to be passed to get executed. So how do you debug a JavaScript code? So to debug your JavaScript code in any browser, you can just press the F12, no matter which browser you have it, either Chrome or Firefox or anyone. can just press the F12 key, and there you can get this option called debugger, where you can just go and perform all the necessary debugging related stuff right over there. Or so many other editors like in Sublime Text, Visual Studio Code, Atom, they're all offering you the built-in support to debug your JavaScript code. Now, what is the difference between a function declaration and function expression? So there's a very simple difference. So when you say function ABC here, okay, so you declare as a separate statement within the same JavaScript code. Okay, in another example, what you do, you define a function within a variable name called A, which you can create to construct some another object for this. That's the only difference between these two. So this function can be called before the function is defined, and this will be created when the function is pointing and reaching it. Okay, so it can be used only after that. So that's what we have discussed now. Going forward, this offers the better code readability and better code organization, and that the other part is basically used to create a conditional or a declaration functions. So what are the ways of adding the JavaScript code in an HTML file? So there are, I would say, two ways are available. One, either you can declare it in a separate file, you can add it, or second, you can write a embedded JavaScript code where you can just write a JavaScript code either in your head tag or body tag. But there'll be one difference, like if you're writing it as an embedded JavaScript, you cannot use it for the different HTML file, where the internal JavaScript file will be limited to that HTML. However, external JavaScript will be more useful when you want to reuse it again and again. So these were some standard basic JavaScript questions for us. So let's go ahead and talk about something which is related to your intermediate questions in JavaScript. Now, so what do you understand about the cookies? See, the cookies are basically a kind of a small text file, okay, which is kept in your browser and contains the information about your client activities. Okay, so whenever the client is accessing your websites, these websites can track your activities through this particular cookies. Okay, so they just basically record your general behaviors, like what you're doing with your website, so that accordingly they can give you the better recommendations. Now, how you're going to create a cookie in your JavaScript? So creating a cookie is one of the property available under your document object, so that you can create it using document.cookie and give a key. So your all cookie stands with your key and value pair. So you have a key, you have a value pair. So how are you going to read the cookie? So cookie you can read with the help of the same property called document.cookie, and here you can just use this statement. Like what? Key and value pair. So whatever the keys you have defined, similar key you will be reading it to give the value of whatever option you want to read it. Now, how are you going to delete the cookie? So cookie can be deleted it very easily by calling this delete cookie function, where you can just tell about the time and duration when you want the cookie to be get deleted. So when you set the expiry time, so cookies are deleted after a specific period of time, that will be treated as a good programming practice. So what is the difference between a let and var keyword? See, there's a new feature which is there added called let keyword, which is known as called block level scope. The block level scope means your variable whichever you're defining under any block level statement will be limited to that particular block. Like if you're defining it any opening block and closing block, so beyond that you cannot see that. Suppose if you're defining it under if block or any block, so these type of variables are no longer accessible outside, where the var keyword will be typically treated as a global variable and hence it can be accessed anywhere. So what is the closure in JavaScript? So closure is basically going to give you a better way of providing the consistent way of developing a JavaScript code for the developer. So closures are basically created whenever a variable that is defined outside of this current scope can be accessed within the current scope. Okay, that means which is a variable which is defined outside of the scope. Even using the scope of this particular closure, it can be accessed inside too. Now, what are the arrow functions in JavaScript? Friends, arrow function in JavaScript is very popular now. They're just gonna give you a kind of alternative way of defining the function keyword. They are just a shortcut way of defining the function in JavaScript. These are the simple handy functions, I would say. So what are the different ways of HTML can be accessed in JavaScript codes? So there are multiple ways are there. So you can access using document.getElement by class name. You can access getElement by ID. You can get access document getElement by tag name, and you can say document.querySelector. So these are the multiple options are where through which you can access the element within your HTML tags. What are the ways of defining a variable? So var keyword, as we discussed, you can define a variable. You can also define the variable using const. So if you define any variable using const, so these variables will get constantly declared and it cannot be changed once you define the value. So any value or any variable which is defined using const, it cannot be changed in later stages. What are imports and exports in JavaScript? So to make your JavaScript modular, so there's an option available of importing it and exporting it. So what exactly the difference? Difference is very simple, like you are writing the set of JavaScript code, and if you want to get it accessed outside in another JavaScript file, so how the two JavaScript files can communicate with each other, that is where exactly the important export code comes to make your JavaScript highly reused and more modular. Now, these are the quick example. As you can see now, two different files are there. So if you want to make your particular variable or function accessed outside, you always use export keyword with them, and if you want to access them out, you can just use an import keyword. As you can see, it is defined there. So another file can easily access the content of the previous files to make your code even more modular and useful. So what is the difference between a document and window in JavaScript? See, document is the one which is a part of your document part, which user can actually see that. Okay, so the document object is the object which falls under the category of window. Window is a top level object. So in JavaScript we have an option available named called BOM, that is called browser object model, in which the top level object which is there, that is called window, and under this we have a called document. So whatever you see under your browser, it is a part of your document. So what are some JavaScript frameworks and their uses? See, JavaScript frameworks are mainly useful to make your application more organized with less code and without getting into the detail. Okay, so having this particular framework will give you the opportunity so that developer can use the JavaScript in much more better way to write a complex code in more simplified manner. This is where exactly your frameworks are designed for. So there are some very prominent and useful frameworks like in React, Angular, Vue.js, and lot many other names are there in market, which will be using this JavaScript as a core and take the entire JavaScript development to the next level. So the next question is, what is the difference between a undefined and undeclared in JavaScript? See, it is very simple. Undefined means the variable which is undefined. You're declaring a variable, okay, and which you haven't defined. Okay, that means the variable has been declared but the value has not yet assigned. That is called undefined. Undeclared means the variable which you're trying to access, that itself is not available. It doesn't even exist. So what is the difference between undefined and null in JavaScript? See, undefined, as I already told you, it means the variable has been declared but it is not assigned with any value. Null is actually the assignment value that we can assign to any variable which contain no values, as an alternative, I would say. So what is the difference between session storage and local storage? See, it is very simple. HTML5 has offered these features to you. So the session storage and local storage both offers you the data which can be stored in a browser, but session storage is short-lived. The moment your page is deleted or closed, the session data is immediately get deleted, where the local storage data is remained for the longer period of time. And the data doesn't get deleted after the browser history is over. Okay, so I would say the local storage time span is far bigger compared to the session storage. Okay everyone, so we'll have some advanced JavaScript questions now. We've already seen the beginner level as well as the intermediate level questions. Now it's time to discuss about some advanced level questions too. Like the first questions comes like how do you empty an array in JavaScript? So it is very simple. If you want to assign, so there are a few ways of that. Number one, by assigning the array length to what? To the 0. So automatically turns to empty. Second is what? By assigning the completely empty array. Okay, the third will be by popping up all the elements of the array. So multiple options are there, and the last which you talk about called by using the splice function. So these are the 4 important aspects are there which you can treat how to empty your JavaScript array in a very simplified manner. Now, what is the difference between event capturing and event bubbling? See, this is one of the very common question. We talk about event capturing. Event capturing is actually the kind of process where you just try to capture the event of outermost element and then propagating it to the innermost element. So event capturing is what, like you're talking about picking up the element or picking up the event from the outermost, like you talk about called nested div tags. So you pick up the particular event from the most outermost div tag and you're just passing it to the innermost. That is called capturing. The bubbling is the process, okay, which starts with the innermost and goes to the outermost element. It's just an opposite direction. That is called event bubbling. So the question is one of the very popular, like what is the strict mode in JavaScript? See, the strict mode of JavaScript is introduced to give the better error handling capacity of the JavaScript. So whenever you talk about call strict mode, so all variables have to be declared explicitly. So you cannot leave it like that, and it cannot be assigned to the read-only properties. So we can enable the strict mode only by adding the use strict mode on the top of the JavaScript file. Now, what about and how we would be able to get the following output of the below JavaScript code? So we have a call var a equal to 10, and we have written one function in the if block, and after that we're just capturing the value of a, and then you are printing the value in a console.log. So what would be the output for that? See, it'll be a call 10 undefined. Once again, it'll be kind of what? It'll be undefined. How come it would be? Look, it is very simple. First thing, okay, in your application, you are basically saying the if condition statement in the code will evaluate the eval function. As you know it very well what exactly the evaluation is. Later on, the eval function, okay, will take the function and will return the function abc, whatever the function it is available, and then inside the if statement it executes the abc and returns the undefined, because as you know it very well, the if statement code executes at runtime while the statement inside this if condition is being evaluated. So that's where exactly it is. Next, can you write a JavaScript code for adding the new element in a dynamic manner? Yes, exactly, you can write it down. So you have this very common function available named document.createElement. Like people say like I want to add the new text boxes when I click on the button. So I can write it very well. So either it will be a text box or it will be the new element you want to add it. So document.createElement is one of the very common, I would say, the function. And later on you can use the typical DOM functions, like I can talk about create next node or append child. So using this combination you can easily do so. Next, what is the difference between call and apply? Very common question. So the call method, whatever the method you have it in a call, these method arguments are provided individually, okay, along with this value. But in apply what happens? Arguments are provided in the form of array along with this value. That is the only difference between call and apply. So what would be the output of the below JavaScript code? As you can see right now, we have written a one object name called student, provided one property called college with ABC. After that you're saying object.create, passing this student as an object itself, and after that you're saying delete student1.college and console.log student.come. So what would be the value for this? So it is very simple. It is a very simple example of object orientation. So the output will be what? ABC, as we are accessing the property of student object. So certainly the value will be what? ABC for sure. Now what would be the output for below JavaScript code? As you can see, now we have written a one function foo and it is written 11. So we are saying type of foo. So this will certainly refer to what? To the error. Reason is why? Because the function definition can have only single reference variable as its name. That's why exactly it will be throwing what? An error to you. How do you remove the duplicate value from the JavaScript array? It is very simple. We have a called filter function. So the filter method, I can basically call it, and three arguments it may be expecting it: the name of the array, the current element, and the index of the current element, so that it can remove all the duplicate elements from there. So how do you remove the duplicate elements from JavaScript array? So it is the same way I told you, like first it takes three parameters, so using the filter method and by using the for loop. So the empty array is used for sorting all the repeating elements. So like that you can simply make it more easy. So how can you draw a simple JavaScript DOM? So you can say it is a very simple JavaScript DOM elements which are there, where you can have the document and then the HTML and followed by all child elements like an head tag, body tag. Body may contain further child elements like an anchor tag. So these are all basically known as called a presentational elements through which this complete HTML hierarchy will contain inside this.
We'll first look at beginner level interview questions. What is TypeScript? TypeScript is an object-oriented and strongly typed programming language, which is a superset of JavaScript. TypeScript was designed by Anders Hijelsberg at Microsoft. The limitations of JavaScript for developing large-scale applications at Microsoft and among its external customers led to the creation of TypeScript. Because of the difficulty of working with complicated JavaScript code, there was a demand for custom tooling to make developing JavaScript components easier. TypeScript code is converted to JavaScript, which can be executed anywhere JavaScript is supported, in the browser or Node.js or any other application. TypeScript is JavaScript with some additional features. To support a more robust interaction with your editor, TypeScript adds additional syntax to JavaScript. TypeScript is a scripting language that understands JavaScript and uses type inference to provide powerful capabilities without additional code. Explain the features of TypeScript. TypeScript supports other JavaScript libraries. TypeScript is a new Microsoft language that is highly typed superset of JavaScript, with support for object-oriented programming and other current features like decorators. Because browsers and Node.js comprehend JavaScript, TypeScript compiles JavaScript. TypeScript is portable. TypeScript is cross-browser, cross-device, and cross-platform. It can run in any environment that supports JavaScript. TypeScript, unlike its competitors, does not require a dedicated virtual machine or a specific runtime environment to run. TypeScript is superset of JavaScript. It is strongly syntactical that superset of JavaScript with the addition of optional static typing. TypeScript is a large-scale application development language that transcompiles to JavaScript. Existing JavaScript programs are also valid TypeScript programs because TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. TypeScript is static. When a client doesn't have a value for a parameter, he can pass null. Optional arguments are a feature of TypeScript. You can declare some arguments in the function optional by utilizing optional parameter features so that the client is not necessary to supply a value to optional parameters. Object-oriented language. When it comes to object-oriented programming with JavaScript, TypeScript shines. Because of the class keyword, it makes object-oriented programming look quite similar to programming in other object-oriented languages like C# or Java. What are export and import keywords in TypeScript? Import keyword is used to export declaration. Example, export star from module. And the export keyword is used to export any variable function and type aliases. Below is the example for import keyword and export keyword. Can TypeScript be used for the backend? TypeScript can be generally used for backend applications by using Node.js and having additional safety that the language brings. How to declare a variable in TypeScript? Let and const are the two methods to declare variables. Variable names can contain alphabets and numeric digits. They cannot contain spaces and special characters, except the underscore and the dollar sign. Variable names cannot begin with a digit. Below is the example code, where we have declared a variable with let method and we have declared a variable inside a function. List the applications of TypeScript. TypeScript can be used to develop JavaScript applications for both client-side and server-side execution. TypeScript can be deployed instead of JavaScript language since it adds more features and gives error directly with the code. TypeScript is used for building large-scale applications for enterprises. How can a base constructor be called from a child class? A base class constructor can be called from child class using the super method, as shown in the example. What are getters and setters? Getters and setters intercept access to a member of the object. They give us a way of having finer-grained control over how a member accesses each object. A getter method starts with the keyword get, and the setter method starts with the keyword set. What is the purpose of tsconfig.json file? tsconfig.json file is a JSON format file in which we can specify different options to tell the compiler how to compile a given project. This file in the directory indicates that the directory is the TypeScript's project root. List the advantages of TypeScript. TypeScript highlights errors at the compilation time during the time of development. Any browser or JavaScript engine can run TypeScript. It has a namespace concept by defining a module. TypeScript supports strongly typed or static typing. TypeScript has the advantages of being tightly typed or allowing static typing. It may confirm type correctness at the compile time because of static typing. What are REST parameters in TypeScript? When the number of parameters that a function will receive is not known or can vary, we can use REST parameters. We can pass 0 or more arguments to the REST parameters. The compiler will create an array of arguments with the REST parameter name. How to compile TypeScript with Visual Studio Code? Visual Studio Code includes TypeScript language support but does not include the TypeScript compiler. We need to install the TypeScript compiler either globally or in your workspace to transpile TypeScript source code to JavaScript. The easiest way to install TypeScript is through Node Package Manager. The Node.js package manager, if you have npm installed, you can install TypeScript globally on your computer by using this command, npm install -g TypeScript. We can test the installed TypeScript by checking the version or help. For this, run the command tsc -version. List access modifiers supported by TypeScript. TypeScript supports three access modifiers: protected, private, and public. In protected, all class members can access them, but the instance cannot. But in private, it's only accessible by members, whereas in public, it is accessible by members, child classes, and instance of the class. List the disadvantages of TypeScript. The TypeScript takes a long time to compile the code. TypeScript does not support abstract classes. An extra compilation step for converting TypeScript into JavaScript. TypeScript has overly complicated typing system. How to debug a TypeScript file? To debug a TypeScript file, a .js source map file is needed to debug the file. Compile the .ts file with the source map flag for generating source map file. Use the command TypeScript tsc space -sourcemapfile.ts. Source mapping URL is equal to file.js.map. How can we convert a string to a number with TypeScript? In TypeScript, conversion from a string to a number can be done using the following commands. Parse int method, and we have parse float method and number method. Explain type aliases. Type aliases give a type a new name. Type aliases are similar to interfaces in that they can be used to name primitives, unions, tuples, and any other kinds that you would have to define by hand otherwise. Aliasing doesn't truly create a new type. Instead, it gives that type a new name. Aliasing a primitive isn't very useful. However, it can be used for documentation purposes. Type aliases, like interfaces, can be in general. All we have to do is add type parameters and utilize them on the right side of alias declaration. Below is the syntax for type aliases. What are nullable types in TypeScript? Null and undefined are the two special types in TypeScript that have the values null and undefined respectively. They are not particularly useful, much like void. Null and undefined are subclasses of all other types by default. That means you can give things like number, null, and undefined values. When the strict null checks flag is set, however, null and undefined can only be assigned to unknown, any, and their respective types. The one exception being that undefined is also assignable to void. This helps to avoid a lot of frequent errors. You can use the union type string, null, undefined if you want to send in either a string, null, or undefined. What is in operator in TypeScript? The in operator serves as a type narrowing expression. The true branch narrows to types that have been an optional or required property n, and the false branch narrows to the types that have an optional or missing properties n for a n in x expression as shown in the example below, where n is a string literal or string literal type and x is a union type. Explain index types in TypeScript. Using index types, we can get the compiler to check code that utilizes the dynamic property names. A typical JavaScript pattern, for example, is to select a subset of an object properties. We may build and use this function in TypeScript using the index type query and indexed access operators. In this example, key of t, the index type query operator. For any type t, key of t is the union of known public property names of t. And t of k, the indexed access operator, is the second operator. The type syntax reflects the expression syntax in this case. T of k can be like index type queries, be used in generic environment, which is where its truly potential is seen. All you have to do now is make sure that the type variable k extends to k of t. What are map types? TypeScript has a feature called map types that allow you to define new types based on the existing ones. The new type turns each property into the old type in the same way in a map type. It's important to note that this syntax refers to a type rather than a member. You can use an intersection type to add more numbers. As you can see in the example, it is the simplest map type and its parts are type keys and type flags, where syntax is similar to the index signatures. With for in the middle, there are three sections in total. The type variable k is assigned to each property one by one, and the literal union of strings. The name of properties to iterate over the stored in keys, and properties type as a result. What is meant by contextual typing? When there is a type on one side of the equation but not on the other, the TypeScript compiler finds out the form. We can omit typing on the right side as TypeScript can work it out automatically. This increases the amount of work needed to type code. Distinguish between TypeScript and JavaScript. TypeScript is an object-oriented programming language, whereas JavaScript is a scripting language. TypeScript supports static typing. JavaScript does not support static typing. In TypeScript, error can be found and corrected during a compile time. In JavaScript, errors can be found only during runtime, as it is an interpreted language. There is support for ES3, ES4, 5, and 6 in TypeScript, whereas in JavaScript, no support for compiling. In TypeScript, functions can have optional parameters, whereas in JavaScript, this is not possible. in TypeScript converted into JavaScript code to be understandable for browsers. JavaScript can be directly used in browsers. TypeScript has proper build setup, node package manager, is required for static type definitions. No build setup is required in JavaScript. What is JSX? JSX is an XML-like syntax that can be embedded. It is intended to be turned into legitimate JavaScript, though the semantics of that transformation will vary depending on the implementation. TypeScript allows you to embed JSX, type, verify it, and compile it to JavaScript immediately. JSX needs to be translated into a valid TypeScript. We use the JSX file with the .tsx extension. Define static typing. Static typing refers to a compiler having variables, parameters, and object members that are recognizable at the compilation time. This helps in detecting early errors. Static typing is an important concept. Static typing is when the compiler enforces that the values use the same type. Here's an example. What is meant by type inference? When you don't specify an explicit type for variable, TypeScript can infer it. Type inference is the term for this. This is normally done during the declaration when the variables or parameters are initialized. TypeScript recognizes that the variable foo is a string, even if we don't mention string as a type. Here is an example. How to create objects in TypeScript. Objects are a collection of keys and values that resemble a dictionary. The keys must be one of a kind. They resemble arrays and are sometimes referred to as associate arrays. An object type in TypeScript refers to any value with properties. It can be defined simply by specifying the properties and the kinds of these properties. As an example, explain different data types in TypeScript. Number, both integer and floating point numbers are represented by the data type number. Boolean has true and false values. String, it is used to denote a string of characters. Void is usually applied to function return types. Null, it's used when an object isn't worth anything. Undefined indicates the value assigned to an uninitialized variable. Any type of value can be assigned to a variable if declared with any data type. What are the benefits of using TypeScript? Compilation. JavaScript is an interpreted language. Thus, there is no need to compile it. As a result, it must be run to ensure authenticity. If there is an error, you write all the code only to find no output. As a result, you will have to spend hours looking for faults in the code. Error checking is provided via the TypeScript transpiler. If TypeScript detects any syntax mistakes, it will compile the code and generate compilation error. This aids in detecting errors before the execution of the script. The next benefit is it provides an optional type system for JavaScript code. When a client doesn't have a value for a parameter, he can pass null. Optional arguments are a feature of TypeScript. You can declare some optional arguments in the function by utilizing optional parameter features, so that the client does not need to supply a value to optional parameters. Strong static typing. JavaScript does not have a powerful static typing system. Through the TLS, TypeScript comes with an optional static typing and type inference system. The TLS can deduce the type of a variable defined with node type based on its value. TypeScript supports object-oriented programming. TypeScript supports classes, interfaces, inheritance, and other object-oriented programming principles. TypeScript supports type definition. Existing JavaScript libraries can use TypeScript type definitions. External JavaScript libraries are defined in TypeScript definition files. As a result, it can include these libraries in TypeScript code. How to install TypeScript? TypeScript is a JavaScript programming language for use in application. TypeScript extends JavaScript with optional types that support tools for large-scale JavaScript application in any browser or any host on any other operating system. To install TypeScript globally with Node Package Manager, which means you can run the TypeScript command from anywhere in your terminal. To install the latest stable version of TypeScript, we just need to run the command npm install-g TypeScript. This will install the latest version of TypeScript. What are decorators? A decorator is a type of declaration that can be used to decorate a class declaration, method, accessor, property, or argument. Decorators take the form expression, where expression must evaluate to a function that will be called with information about the decorated declaration when it is called at runtime. What are mixins? Combining simpler particle classes is a popular approach of constructing classes from reusable components. For languages like Scala, you may be familiar with the concept of mixins or characteristics. To extend a base class, the design relies on generics and class inheritance. The finest mixin support in TypeScript is provided through the class expression pattern. Explain classes in TypeScript. Classes are not supported in JavaScript ES5 or earlier. This feature that TypeScript inherits from ES6. A class is a collection of items with similar characteristics. Fields, methods, constructor, blocks, nested classes, and interfaces are all included in the classes. Below is the syntax to declare a class. In terms of OOPs, a class is a template for producing objects. What is a namespace and how to declare it? The namespace is used to group functionalities logically to enable a single or a group of linked functionalities. A namespace can include interfaces, classes, functions, and variables. The namespace keyword followed by the namespace name can be used to construct a namespace. Curly brackets can be used to define all interfaces, classes, and other objects. Below is the syntax for namespace. Explain the components of TypeScript. Internally, the TypeScript language is separated into three layers. Each of these layers is further subdivided into language, compiler, and language services. Language, it is written in TypeScript and includes TypeScript language components. It includes syntax, keywords, and type annotations. Compiler, the TypeScript compiler converts TypeScript programs into JavaScript code. It also converts our TypeScript code to JavaScript code, parsing and type checking it. It provides information that allows editors and other tools to deliver greater assistance, capabilities like automated refactoring and IntelliSense. It adds a layer of abstraction to the core compiler pipeline. What are the recent advancements in TypeScript? TypeScript 4.2 has been released and it includes more flexible type annotations, tougher checks, and additional configuration choices and a few breaking changes. REST arguments can now be placed anywhere in triple type. In type error messages, type aliases are no longer enlarged, resulting in a better developer experience. TypeScript 4.2 brings the language one step closer to its aim of accurately typing JavaScript at any size, anywhere JavaScript is used. Describe as syntax in TypeScript. The as is an additional syntax in TypeScript for type assertion. It was introduced as the original syntax conflicted with JSX. While using JSX with TypeScript, only as style assertions can be used. Define Lambda function. TypeScript provides shorthand syntax for defining function expressions. A Lambda function is an anonymous function without a name. Below is an example for Lambda function. What are conditional types in TypeScript? Based on a condition given as a type relationship test, a conditional type chooses one of the two alternative types. When t can be assigned to u, the type is x, and when t can't, the type is y. Because the condition depends on one or more type variables, a conditional type t extends to u. X is to Y and is either resolved to X or Y or delayed. Whether to resolve to X or Y or to differ when T or U contains type variables is determined by whether the type system has enough information to conclude that T is always assignable to U. What is an interface with reference to TypeScript? The interface defines the syntax for classes to follow. A class implementing an interface implements all its members. It can be referenced but not instantiated. TypeScript compiler uses an interface for type checking. What is a declare keyword in TypeScript? As JavaScript does not have TypeScript declaration, to use it in the TypeScript file without any compilation error, declare keyword is used. The keyword is used for ambient methods and declarations to define a variable that exists elsewhere. Now we will look at advanced level interview questions. What are object-oriented principles supported by TypeScript? All object-oriented principles, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction are supported by TypeScript. Encapsulation is a major component of object-oriented programming language, and its method of structuring code so that each block of code has its own set of access points for external code. Polymorphism occurs when many classes inherit from the same parent and override the same functionality. Each of those kit classes is now responsible for implementing a property or method, but they may do so it on their own unique way. Inheritance. TypeScript makes creating an object model and inheritance chain a breeze to construct classes. Simply use the standard class keyword. Abstraction is a method of modeling objects in a system that separates the responsibilities of the classes or type from the code that inherits it. Explain index signatures in TypeScript. Index signatures interact with the key of and T of k. The type of an index signature argument must be either a string or a number. If your type has a string index signature, key of T will be a string or a number because in JavaScript we can access an object property using either string or numbers, and T of string is simply the index signature's type. The index signature consists of the index name and its type in square bracket, followed by colon and the value type. What are assert signatures? The assert signature features allows us to construct functions that operate as type guards as a side effect, instead of returning their Boolean result explicitly. After assert string, TypeScript has no way of knowing if you have guaranteed the type of input. To prevent this, most people just make the parameter input string, which is fine. But it also moves the type of checking problem somewhere, and in circumstances where you just want to fail hard, having the option is beneficial. What is type assertion? Explain its types. A type assertion is similar to a typecast in other languages, but it does not do any additional data verification or restructuring. It has no effect on runtime and is only used by the compiler. There are two types of assertions. One is the as syntax, other is the angle bracket syntax. Below is the example for as syntax and angle bracket syntax. Explain how TypeScript files can be supported from node modules. TypeScript includes a series of declaration files. However, there are two drawbacks to using these declaration files with TypeScript. One is while upgrading TypeScript, we must deal with changes to TypeScript's built-in declaration files. And the other is customizing these files to meet the needs and the demands of project dependencies is difficult. A new feature like @types was added that allows to override the specific built-in library. Then we can update TypeScript and the log file in dependency management, ensuring that it utilizes the same version of the DOM types. As a result, we can update the types on our own schedule. Explain the TypeScript generics. TypeScript Generics is a tool for creating reusable components in TypeScript. It builds a component that can interact with various data kinds. It enables users to consume these components while also using their own kinds. The identity function now has a type variable called type. This type allows us to capture the type of data the user supplies, for example, a number or a string, so that we can use it later. We are going to utilize type as the return type once more. Below is the syntax for TypeScript generics. What is recursive type aliases? The ability to recursively reference type aliases has always been eliminated. The reason for this is because each type aliases must be capable of substituting itself for whatever it aliases. Interfaces can be recursive, but their expressiveness is limited and type aliases cannot. That involves combining the two, creating a type aliases and extracting the type's recursive portions into interfaces. It's effective. TypeScript has no trouble working with the interfaces and the other object types because they introduce a level of indirection and their whole structure does not need to be eagerly built up. Explain tail-recursion elimination on conditional types. When TypeScript identifies infinite recursion or any type expansions that take a long time and damage your editor experience. As a result, TypeScript includes heuristics to ensure that it doesn't run off the tracks while working with types that provide a lot of intermediate results. The trim left type removes spaces from the beginning of string-like type. When provided a string type with a space at the beginning, trim left returns a reminder of the string to the user. Advanced TypeScript removes tail recursion from conditional types. It can prevent intermediary instantiations as one branch of conditional type is merely another conditional type. Explain the awaited type and promise improvements. This type is intended to represent activities such as await in async functions and the .then method on promises, notably the way they recursively unwrap promises. Existing APIs such as JavaScript, built-ins like promise.all, promise.trace, and others can benefit from the awaited type. In fact, some of promise.all's inference concerns provided as foundation for awaited. Promise.all combines certain traits with the awaited to produce far superior inference results. So with that, we have reached the end of this video. Thank you so much for being here. Keep learning and stay tuned to Simplilearn.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.